Hi, it's Dr. Parikh, and today we're talking about the literature review themes. That's one of the names that I just made up. So in a literature review, in a paper, the main section that talks about previous literature review is the introduction. And again, it will sometimes be called a literature review because that's what it's doing. It's reviewing the literature. But there's also a type of paper that where there's no new research being added. The point of the paper is to say, let's review a bunch of the studies that have been done on this topic and talk about, how they fit together and the strengths and weaknesses of each. And that's a literature review paper. There's a way to do that, and you actually run some stats on it, and that's called a meta-analysis. So it's analyzing findings from lots of different articles, but that's a more complicated study because you're doing some statistics. For this course, we're just doing the literature review and then a research proposal for a pretty simple research paper. So the literature review themes is what I call the part of the paper where you're actually making your main points about the articles. Again, the dates and the order of the dates, things like that might change over time. I'm trying to get the right balance because I want to give you as much time as possible in the beginning without rushing things too far at the end. And at the end of every semester, I try to get some feedback from students about the pacing. Where did you feel like you needed more time? Where did you feel like had more time than you needed? That's also part of why I always try to go through the weekly check-ins, because that's one of the ways I find out where people's stress level is and whether I need to either send out an announcement or even adjust dates, sometimes within that course, but more often for a future course. So literature review themes, you've already done your concept map at this point, and I try to give a little bit of lag time so that if you have trouble with your concept map, you can get in to talk with me one way or another before this is due. But as soon as you think you might need a meeting, contact me. This outline is not a true outline. It's more like a structured rough draft of your paper. And there are absolutely no quotes allowed in here. Your final paper can have some quotes. You'll notice most of the sample papers do not. And when you look at the articles that you're using, most of them have very few, if any, quotes. Quoting is something that's done rarely, usually because you're sharing like an early or seminal definition of something, or you're quoting directly from a participant. So if you have a qualitative study in your set of articles, so one where there was a lot of interviews done with participants or they wrote sections, you might be more likely to quote just because participants say interesting things, and you might want to pass that on. So here, the background paragraph, and it's helpful to go back and look at the sample papers to get a sense of things. Let me see if I can pull one up real quick. Oh, my internet is being funky, so probably not. Yep, I don't know why it thinks I'm offline right now, but yeah. This is why I try to pull up the important documents before I get started recording. But it's helpful to look back over a sample paper. So you've got the heading Literature Review, which will become Introduction when you switch into a research proposal. Most published articles don't have that heading because they don't have the first roadmap paragraph either, the one that kind of orients what's the main point. This is a very academic format. So the background paragraph is meant to be information to kind of get everybody on the same page. So you start really broad and then you funnel down. Sorry, my screen is narrow and I'm distracted by how I can't put my hands very broad. So you start broad and you funnel down to get to your specific topic. This is where that fourth article often comes in handy, especially for the first sentence or two. And this is different from the attention getter you'll use at the beginning of your roadmap paragraph. So really always, keep in mind the overall layout of the paragraph and what's going where. These do need to be cited, and you can grab a new source for it, but I talk about acceptable sources, but they're acceptable for things, like statistics, But if you're using like a definition of a disorder, I'm usually going to want you to use something like the DSM. And I actually may update this a little bit because I think this is more inclusive than I usually if it ends in .gov, I'm good with it. Things from NAMI and APA, so National Alliance for Mental Illness, and the American Psychological Association, those, again, it depends. If it's just a handout that's meant for the general public, I'm usually going to want you to have a more scholarly source than that. And for NAMI, for example, they might do some research or cite some research, and I'll typically want you to cite that original research rather than them. So you can look into CDC or a .gov website. That's typically going to be something where they did the data collection. So I'm more likely to let you cite those websites. Textbooks still aren't going to work, but you could look at the reference they use and see if you can find that reference. So here you're usually doing more broad statements. Again, don't use Wikipedia as a citation source. You can use it as a learning source, but always follow up by looking at the original sources. Excuse me, they've gotten a lot better since they started at having citations for things. So you can follow and explore the source for yourself. And so you can see here, I really follow what the paragraph needs. You need a topic sentence, and I always recommend writing those last. I find I get a lot of writer's block when I try to start with the topic sentence, but I have an easier time when I've written the rest of the paragraph, and then I say, okay, what is the main point I made in that paragraph in one sentence? And that's my topic sentence most of the time. Make sure you're including citations as you go. So this section, you may not have anything pre-written that will help you, but you might. So when you're writing this, have your article notes, have your little fun strips of paper from the article sort, have it all in front of you, because you can copy and paste directly from your article notes into your outline. And this is where you see that you can use feedback I've given you. So you submit your article notes, I give you some feedback, your peers give you some feedback. I think on article, maybe not on article notes, but for many assignments you get feedback from me and your peers and sometimes a writing tutor. You don't get to typically go back and redo the assignment. Only a couple assignments do I let you redo until it's right. But you get to still make the fixes, and then the next assignment will use that information that's now corrected. And I will start to get annoyed, for example, if I see a citation is wrong in your themes outline. I always give feedback about citations at the notes level because I want you to have it right the rest of the time. And sometimes I'll even, if I'm annoyed enough, I'll start digging and find, I'll look back and say, yeah, I gave you that feedback. I found it here. So you want to make sure that you are addressing issues as we go, because the point of this course is that I give feedback and you use it to create a better product and to learn how to be a better writer in the future. So your literature review, the main chunk of it, I have a very simple layout that I can kind of give it to you like a formula and it works. As you get into more complex papers, this same formula might not keep working. You may have to adapt it. It might be bigger. But it gives you a sense of how to structure while during this learning phase. It's like, how do you learn? How do you develop that judgment for how to set up a paper? So we do a very simple 2-heading paper with 2 paragraphs under each heading. You can do more if you want. I don't recommend trying to fit in a third theme just because for the scope of the paper, it ends up being too much work. You can add an extra paragraph or 2 if you want, and these are minimums. So I'm okay if you add a third paragraph, but if you only have 1 paragraph, you'll lose points. Here I say theme 1 heading, but I want you to actually delete it and say mental health and pregnant, whatever your topic is. For examples, I often do whatever pops into my head. So you want something, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 words. So 1 to 5 words is a nice little guideline. I forget if that's an official APA guideline or if that's just a rule of thumb that I've given you to give some guidance. But if it takes up the whole line, it's a little too detailed for the reader. These are like signposts. Street signs that are super detailed are really tough to read when you're walking or driving by, especially driving. So you want to keep it quick and punchy and to really You're trying to help the reader follow the main flow of your argument. So you're going to have 2 paragraphs, each with a topic sentence. But again, topic sentence can come last. So these supporting ideas, each of them needs to have a citation, and each paragraph needs to have 2 different citations. Now you can have, many good paragraphs have 3 to 4 supporting ideas. And it's okay if several of those are coming from the same place, but I want to see at least 2 different citations in each paragraph. Remember, I'm forcing you to break out of the easy route, which is always going to be to just tell me everything from one article at once, especially because you only have a few articles. By the time you get to 20 articles, now you've got lots of little snippets that you can weave together, and in some ways that's easier. But we need to give you the skills so that you can get to that point, which is why this paper is so structured and rigid, because it's the best way I've figured to teach you these skills. So in an ideal world, you can copy and paste these directly from your article notes. Ideally, the article sort helps you think about how those go together. You may need to edit them as you go. I'm okay with them not completely flowing at this point, but just know you have to edit at some point. So you can edit now, you can edit later. It's up to you. So you have 2 supporting ideas and a topic sentence. When you do edit those together, that's going to be things like adding in little keywords. Often 1 or 2 words at the beginning of the sentence make a huge difference for the reader. So in addition, blah, 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 that tells me that this is continuing the same main idea. Or in contrast, now I know that it's different. Or on the other hand. So these small phrases help the reader know what you want me to know, how I'm supposed to think about these 2 together. And then your topic sentence also, should also tell me how everything fits. So you have 2 paragraphs, and you need, remember, so 2 different citations in each paragraph, 3 citations total for each theme, so each main heading. And more is always okay, less is not. So theme 2, same thing. Think about what will communicate. You really want the reader to understand how these sections are different. You want to be short and punchy. And you do 2, again, everything's a paraphrase. You can include quotes in your final paper. And so if you have at least 2 paraphrases and you want to copy down a quote, and you can just like add a little note saying, I know, this is in addition to the other paraphrases so that you don't lose points. But really the focus is on your paraphrases. It's enough for you to tell me in your words the main findings, the main ideas from the paper. You don't need to use a quote. And often people who use a quote will follow up with their own words anyway, which is what you're supposed to do when you use a quote. And so I often tell them, your own words, maybe with just a little addition, is enough. You don't need to use the quote to have power. And your topic sentences. And that's it. That's, these 5 paragraphs, this is the bulk of your paper. This is the main point. And it's you weaving together ideas from papers to say something slightly different than what's ever been said before. So it's still a really cool part of writing. And remember, once you've got this outline is going to take you some time, but converting it into a draft is going to go so quickly. You'll want to make sure that your topic sentences make sense when you do that conversion. You want to even make sure the flow from one paragraph to the next makes sense. So your topic sentences might have some of those transitional words, or you might even add a sentence at the end that transitions a little bit into the next section. You usually will want to have more than 3 to 4 sentences in a paragraph. 4 is okay-ish. You're looking for about 4 to 6. Remember, if your paragraph is more than half a page, it is way too long. You're shooting for about 1/3 to half a page for each paragraph. And you want to make sure that it doesn't feel choppy, that there's a flow. Try reading it out loud. Have a friend read it and tell you where they got confused. Things like that as you're converting this theme outline into your draft. But overall, it's a pretty, it's the hardest outline and the easiest draft you'll ever write. I think that's what you need to know. Let me let me just check back and we'll look real quick. Again, as a reminder, there's a rubric. There's always a rubric. And the rubric is how I communicate a lot of my information about the quality of the writing. For the outline, I do give more comments than usual because it's such a crucial building block and my internet's not working, so it's not going to bring it up. Another important piece is that this outline seems to be in many ways the make or break step. I can't think of anybody who has ever finished the outline and not finished the class, other than like medical issues. So if you're struggling with the outline, that's actually a really significant sign that you need to talk with me. Now, that doesn't mean if the outline's hard, you need to talk with me. But if you've if you've sat down to do it 5 or 6 times and, stared at the page for half an hour and given up, you need to come talk with me. If you have spent, if you're sitting there for 3 hours and you're still not making progress, you need to come talk with me. Because often a 15 or 20 minute chat with me can save you a couple hours of just spinning your wheels. So if you feel like you're not getting traction on this paper or on this step, if you just feel lost, now is the make or break time. If you don't meet with me now, you're probably not going to successfully complete the course if you're feeling that way. If you're not sure whether you need to meet with me, you can always just email me and check in and say, here's what I'm feeling. Do you think we need to talk? Or we could just do like a quick phone conversation sometime. It doesn't have to be these big formal meetings. That being said, lots of people finish the course without ever meeting with me, maybe a couple emails back and forth. So it's not like you have to meet with me, but I just want to make it clear that I am open. I am here. Meeting with students is part of my job. And often, if you're worried about wasting my time, handing in a terrible outline will actually waste a lot more of my time because grading takes a lot of time when there's a lot of mistakes. And in fact, if something's so wonky, I may just say, look, we really need to connect. And if you can't connect, I need to just make a screencast where I'm talking to you because I can't write it out. It's too much. So this is a good time to check in, think how you're feeling about the course. It may seem oddly late in the course about writing for the paper to still not be due, but you are doing significant work on it along the way. I think that's what you need to know about literature review themes. Remember, anytime you have questions about these videos, you can email me, but you can also pop over to YouTube and just comment in the YouTube video because I'll get a notification, I'll go in and I'll clear it up. And the nice thing is, if you're confused, it's very likely that someone else who watches it is going to be confused. So when you pop over to YouTube, check to see if someone else has commented and I've responded. But also that way there's a record of this question and my answer for anyone who comes later and is struggling with the same question. All right, thanks for watching. Bye.